Hello everyone, hope you're all okay. Today we are continuing with the social approach to explaining consumer behaviour. So we're going to be looking at the evaluation side of things today, as well as recapping what we learned last lesson. So you'll need your textbooks, your notes to write in, your pen, and also the exam questions that I asked you to complete last lesson, because we're going to go through the answers today. So to recap what we learned last lesson, I want you to consider this scenario. The level of drinking on some student university campuses is a cause for concern. Psychologists have tried to use the techniques we discussed last lesson to reduce alcohol use. Some programs have been more successful than others. One issue is that most students have completely the wrong idea about how much other students drink. They think other students drink a lot more than the other students really do. Ironically, this means that individual students drink more because they think that they need to keep pace with everyone else. So with reference to what we learned about last lesson, which is social norms, normative social influence, social proof, and the bandwagon effect, which strategies could you use to reduce student driving? So feel free to look back into your textbooks in order to help you do this. And then also, are there any potential unintended consequences of trying to change drinking behaviour? Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to think about that. In terms of the first question, what we need to do with reference to this situation is correct the misperceptions about social norms. So social norms is something that we believe, or a way that we're expected to behave. It can be perceived, so it doesn't have to be the actual norm, it can just be what we perceive a norm to be, so what we think other people are doing. And if the perceived social norm is that people drink excessively, then we need to correct that misperception and actually find out how much students actually drink, so then we're fitting more in to the actual norm. So if not all students drink a lot, we're less likely to create normative social influence. So we're less likely to fit in, to drink a lot in order to fit in and to not be rejected by the group. You could have also explained it in terms of social proof. So this is saying that in a situation where we don't know what to think or do, we look for others for social proof of what is happening and how we should behave. So we can look at those. In this case, we can look at what's actually correct behaviour. So obviously drinking in moderation, and use informational social influence to conform to that behaviour of drinking not as much. As an example of that, in the context of public health, for example, a campaign to change behaviour might imply that lots of people like you are doing something. So might say actually 90% of students only drink once a week, and this would make more people drink less. And then you could have also explained it in terms of the bandwagon effect. So if a lot of people are doing something, then you're more likely to do it. So consider, I don't know if you've heard, a lot of people, I know some of my friends were doing it, dry January, so drinking no alcohol at all for the whole of January. And that has definitely been a bandwagon effect. A lot of people have jumped on to that because they've seen a lot of people on social media, all their friends are doing it. Are there any potential unintended consequences of trying to change drinking behaviour? Well, we're going to look at some research later on that actually says that trying to change people's behaviours actually can make it go the other way sometimes. So by asking people, how much do you drink? How often do you drink? It can actually reinforce that they actually really like drinking, and it might even make them drink more. But more on that later on. Last lesson, I asked you to complete these 3 exam questions, and I'm going to go through the answers now. So make sure you have them in front of you so you can check how many marks you've got. So question 1 said, explain how the social approach accounts for consumer behaviour. Use the concept of social proof in your answer. So firstly, I gave an overview of what the social approach believes causes consumer behaviour. So I said the social approach believes social norms and our society influence our consumer behaviour. For example, social proofing states that in situations where we are not sure what to do or believe, We may look for other people for guidance because we think the others are better informed. Therefore, we look at other people's reviews before buying a product. So if you didn't mention social proofing in your answers, then you get 0, because the question deliberately told you to. So you needed to give me a definition of social proofing and then give me an example as well. So looking at reviews. Question 2 said, explain one way in which the social approach can inform strategies to change behaviour. And I talked about the bandwagon effect. So I said the bandwagon effect is a form of normative social influence and is when people do something because a lot of other people are doing it. Adverts and campaigns can use the bandwagon effect by trying to create the illusion that a behaviour is already popular, perhaps by showing lots of people doing it or talking about it. This will make people more likely to adopt this particular behaviour. So make sure in any term that you're explaining, obviously to explain it as I just have with the bandwagon effect, don't just say the bandwagon effect and assume that the examiner knows what you're talking about. Make sure that you are telling the examiner that you know what the bandwagon effect is. And then you need to be relating it back to consumer behaviour. So don't just talk about it generally. Talk about adverts and campaigns, and products and brands, etc. And that should get you 3 marks. And then question 3 said, give 3 features of the social approach that can explain consumer behaviour. So you could have talked about any of the ones that we spoke about last lesson. You could have talked about social norms, social proofing, normative social influence, or the bandwagon effect. I've put, most people have a strong desire to conform to social norms, and this is often exploited by advertising by implying that if you own a certain product, you can remain part of that social group. Remembering to link it back to consumer behaviour. Everything that you say should link back to consumer behaviour. Someone subjected to normative social influence may buy products or specific brands in order to fit in with their friends, because not doing so might risk being rejected or ousted by the group. The bandwagon effect suggests once a product or brand is adopted by a critical mass of people, many more join in. So there you go. There's 3 features of the social approach that's explained consumer behaviour. If you've only explained 1, then you can only get 1 mark. If you've explained 2, no matter how wonderful the explanations were, you can only get 2 marks, because it told you to describe 3. So I've described social norms, normative social influence, and the bandwagon effect. But you might have explained social proof as well, which is absolutely fine, as long as you've related it back to consumer behaviour. Did you know that more than 90% of this class do extra exam questions after completing every topic? So 90% of you are going away after lessons and doing all of the practice exam questions in the book. So why not you if you are not one of these 90%? So although I have completely made that statistic up, how did it make you feel? Did it make you feel like you wanted to join this? Did it feel like you wanted to do more exam practice after reading that? If you believed it, that is. But basically, what I'm going to show you in the next slide is that there is research support for conformity to social norms. So if you believed that the social norms of this class was to go away after every lesson and do lots of extra work, then you would be more likely to also do that. So the first evaluation point is that strength is that research shows that many people readily conform to norms once they are aware of them. So as I go through these evaluation issues, I just want you to make notes on them, not write them word for word, just write them in a way that you understand, in brief bullet points. It was researched by Berger and Shelton. Basically what they did is they went into universities and put signs around that said, did you know more than 90% of the time people in this building use the stairs instead of the elevator? Why not you? And then they compared the usage of how many people went up the stairs and how many people used the elevators, and compared to the week before, 46% more people used the stairs rather than the elevator, a figure maintained for a week after the notices were removed. So even after the notices were removed, that behaviour continued, which is showing that the influence of social norms on health-related behaviours is effective at changing people's behaviours. It also supports the concept of social proof. Why? Because social proof is when you're not sure how to act or how to behave, you're not sure whether you should take the lift or go up the stairs, then you look at what other people are doing in order to inform your decisions. So it's proof, it's evidence for social proof and also conformity to social norms. So a nice piece of research there for you to remember. Which one of these pictures makes you want to drink Diet Coke more? Is it the one of Taylor Swift writing lyrics and sipping Diet Coke through a lovely little bendy straw? Or is it the guy who nobody knows, I don't think you'd know him, who's just in his house? Which one makes you want to drink Diet Coke more? What research would suggest is that you are more likely to do something or wear a product or a specific brand if you see a celebrity or a famous person doing it. And this is support for the bandwagon effect. So here we have Chance the Rapper wearing Ralph Lauren. I'm going to tell you the relevance of this just now. So Naya Siobecka, nailed it, tested the bandwagon effect among a group of teenage Polish students. So some of them saw an advert for a Ralph Lauren shirt, and it was associated with a famous person. So they either saw Beyonce or Bill Gates wearing Ralph Lauren. And then they compared this with a control group of students that saw the advert without a famous person. And the experimental group, the ones who saw the famous person, were more willing to display a significantly bigger Ralph Lauren logo on their t-shirt. So basically, if they saw the famous person, they would be more likely to wear a big Ralph Lauren logo, whereas those in the control group wouldn't. So this shows that the bandwagon effect can explain the sudden popularity of even expensive products in terms of conformity to social roles, because we think if a celebrity or a famous person is wearing it, then everybody must be wearing it. So you're more likely to jump on that bandwagon and do it, unless, as we spoke about last lesson, you're the opposite and you want to do things that nobody else is doing. But even so, this is research support for the bandwagon effect. However, a weakness of the social explanations to consumer behaviour is that there are cultural differences in social proof. So social proof isn't as effective in some cultures as it is in others. So we're going to look at the USA, which is an individualist culture, and we're going to look at Poland, which is a collectivist culture. And I don't know if you'll remember this, we did it quite a long time ago now. We talked about the differences between individualist cultures and collectivist cultures. So with individualist cultures, we focus more on the individual and their individual goals, whereas in collectivist cultures, the focus is on group approval, and we try to kind of please the group and the community that we would belong to more than individualist cultures. And I use the example of marriage to describe this. So in an individualist culture like the USA or the UK, we're more likely to marry someone just because of them. You know, we don't it doesn't really matter if they don't come from a good family or if they don't come from a family that gel wells with yours. Whereas in a collectivist culture, that is very, very important, and you wouldn't marry someone who's basically, you wouldn't marry someone if their family didn't fit with yours, because you marry for obviously love as well, I have no doubt, but more for the group approval and yes, to meet the goals of your community and your family. So Cialdini compared social proof in the USA, which is an individualist culture, and a collectivist culture, Poland. Participants in both cultures were more willing to agree with a request when told all their peers had agreed than when told none of them had agreed. So here we see that yes, social proof happens in both cultures, both types of cultures. People look for the right information and go along with that based on what other people are doing. But the level of agreement was much greater in Poland, suggesting that social proof is more effective in a collectivist culture. This confirms previous findings showing that conformity is more common in collectivist cultures. So this means that campaigners and advertisers who wish to use social proof must take cultural factors into account, where usually they don't, because they don't tend to change their advertising between cultures, but maybe that is a good idea in order to meet these cultural differences. Okay, so quickly think about a boomerang. What is a boomerang? And based on that, what do you think is meant by the boomerang effect? So I've never actually had a boomerang. I don't know if you guys have, but I'm sure you're aware a boomerang is a thing that you throw. When you throw it, it comes back to you. So it's used as a weapon in some Aboriginal cultures, but usually it's just like a little toy that you play with. So based on this, the boomerang effect is when you try to change something, but then it kind of backfires and it comes back to you. And that's going to be our next evaluation point. The final weakness I want to discuss is this of the boomerang effect. So sometimes attempts to use norms to positively change behaviour can backfire. And this was found by Werner. Basically, she used a group discussion about toxic and non-toxic household products to try and reduce the non-toxic products that people used. And students started discussing this, and what happened is that none of them were actually persuaded to switch. Actually discussing why they use certain household products persuaded them to use them more. And this use of toxic products became the norm, the group norm, and reminded participants why they used them. There was another study on electricity use where they tried to reduce the electricity use of people by comparing their use with their neighbours. And what they found is that, yes, those who used a lot of electricity did reduce their electricity usage, but those who didn't use a lot of electricity saw how much other people were using and thought, oh, okay, I can use that much. And they actually increased their electricity usage, so doing the opposite of what the researchers wanted. So these studies demonstrate that psychological processes involved are neutral, and they can have unintended consequences, that undermine attempts to change behaviour. And this refers back to the question that I asked you for the starter. Can using these things that we've spoken about with the social approach to explaining consumer behaviour actually have some damaging, unintended consequences? And the answer is yes, it can. So you could talk about this if you were asked a question about that. To finish off, I want you to answer this exam style question. So Ranjana was staying in a hotel for 3 nights. When she used the bathroom, she noticed a sign saying, "Please help us save water and protect the environment by reusing your towels." Most guests at the hotel reuse their towels at least once during their stay. So Ranjana used the same towels through her whole stay. Explain one example of the bandwagon effect in this scenario. So that's A02, which means you have to talk about Ranjana very specifically. If you don't mention Ranjana, then you won't get any marks because it tells you to explain something from that scenario. And then B is outline how social proof might have influenced Ranjana's behaviour. So go back to social proof, tell me what it is, and then talk about Ranjana and how she's demonstrating this. Okay, that is all for today's lesson. As always, any questions, let me know. Please upload your notes onto Teams so that I know you are on track, and have a lovely day.